Hey everybody, it's Adam from The Army Painter, and we have a very exciting tutorial for you today. Today we're going to be painting up a brand new Necron warrior model to tabletop standards. So let's take a look at the paints that we're going to be using today. After you've assembled your model, it's time to grab your paints, your wet palette, some clean water, and a brush, and let's get started painting. I've gone ahead and primed the model in our color primer gun metal. I'm going to go ahead and apply our first base tone, and for this we're going to be using rough iron from the metallic Warpaints range. We're just going to apply this to all of the hard body areas, the carapace as you will on the model, like the shoulder here, this little arm bit here. You also want to paint it across the face. Keep the back of the face, the back of the skull in gunmetal, however. So just go ahead and apply this. You might need to apply a second thin coat across the model. If you find that you've maybe thinned down your paints too much, it's okay. Just very quickly, always better to work with thin down paints than over thick paints because you don't want to obscure any detail. But if you do feel like you need to go ahead and apply a second coat, by all means, go ahead. Now that we have the rough iron complete on all the areas on the model that we want, we're going to go ahead and bring out some brighter tones on this rough iron armor. For that, I'm using a Masterclass dry brush and another new metallic paint from our upcoming metallic paint set. It's going to have some really cool colors in it. We've been testing it. We've been showing it to y'all on stream, getting your feedback, and you seem to be pretty excited about it. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a bit excited as well. So I'm going to apply this as a dry brush in some areas, and in other areas almost like an overbrush, because I want to make sure I get a good solid base of this evil chrome, is what we're calling it now, fitting for this robotic warrior that we're painting here today. So I just want to get almost a base coat in some areas, and in other areas I do want to just ensure that that rough iron exists in the recesses. You can go a little overboard here. We did prime this in gunmetal, and if you do have to go back and reestablish some of that base tone color primer, we can, because our color primers are a 100% match to our war paints. Like I said, I'm just going to go back and tidy up some of the areas that I want to remain in that gunmetal tone. So just taking a little bit of gunmetal, and I've got a regiment brush here. I'm just going to go ahead and clean up these areas, make sure any of the overbrushing that we got from that dry brush stage is just nice and cleaned up. Now we're just going to apply Quickshade Strong Tone all over the brassy and metallic, the silver metallic areas on the model. We're just going to apply this very liberally from the top down, right out of the pot. I did not thin this down, and we're just going to apply this all over the model. Careful to let it pool in the recesses, but what you don't want to have happen is for it to pool up. You see, if you just apply it like that, it starts to pool in the corner. Just take your brush and move it around a bit. Give it a little bit of time to dry, about 15 to 20 minutes. You can, if you're painting a batch of these warriors, or a whole unit, you can just move on to your next one. By the time you're done, it should be ready to apply the next coat of paint. Next, we're just going to add a dot of matte white to the eyeballs here, very carefully. And then we're also going to apply this to some of the areas on the weapon to give off a nice glowing effect. Now, we will be painting in these areas. You can paint outside the lines a little bit. It's okay. Thin down your paints to get nice, even, and smooth coverage. Now, we're not going to paint these glowing bits white, but what we're doing with this matte white is that we're just going to apply this to give us a nice, smooth, and bright base tone, because these are such tiny areas. When we're going to paint in the next color, it's going to give us a nice canvas for it to adhere to. It's okay if it's still a little bit see-through. We're just using this, like I said, as a canvas for the next step. Now I'm going to apply it here on this little piece, this little tube, I guess, is tubing, power tubing. power cabling on the weapon. We'll also apply it to these rods here. And if you look around the model, on the back side of this one, there's a little spider dude hanging off his back. So we're just going to paint in the eye, dot that with some of the white. And there's also some cables coming out. This guy looks like he's been at battle for eons and eons. And he's part living, part robot. He suffered some crazy battle damage over the years. There's also some of his robotic guts hanging out underneath his torso inside of his rib cage here. So I'm just going to give that a nice little base coat of our white paint as well. Now we're going to go over all the areas that we previously painted in matte white with snake scales from the Warpaints range. Now this is a very bright, almost neon green, and you can really see why we started this with a base coat of white. These lighter color greens tend to be slightly weaker because they are in that yellow family, and yellow is a weaker pigment. So it gives us a nice even base coat, and we should be able to get one nice smooth layer of this to get that desired neon green, glowing green effect on all of these glowing orbs, eyes, and other features on this robot. Now our snake scales has dried completely. We're going to take a little bit of our Quickshade green tone, and we're just going to apply that into the recesses of all of these areas just to add a little bit of a shadow. You can see here I just kind of touch the orb, and the wash does its magic and it works its way into the recesses. You can really see how it's defining the details on the model here. Next, we're going to paint all the areas that we want to be black on the model, like here, but we're actually using a gray. I am using Necromancer Cloak. This is a nice dark gray. We will be applying a wash to this to darken it back down and bring it closer to the black color that we want. So I'm just going to apply this to the casing of the gun here, and very carefully, this is where you're going to want to just take your time. We're going to apply this around these coils, these energy coils on the gun. So very carefully without painting into the recess. You see that I just got a little bit there on that orb. That's what we want to watch out for. It's no big problem. I'm just going to clean off my brush here real quick. You can go right back with that original color, that snake scales, and just reapply it to clean it up when you're done. So all the areas on the model that you would like to have this black appearance, we're going to paint in Necromancer Cloak very carefully. I find that using thin down paints with a little bit of clean water really helps with the control when you're painting in these fine details here. Another area that we'd like to paint in this color is this little piece here on his chest. And I'm going to leave the emblem that is already silver as best as I possibly can, just to save us some time a little bit later. It's fairly easy to do. When you need to paint the other side, it helps an awful lot to just turn the model upside down and find your way in there with the brush, like so. Then to finish it off, we're just going to take a little bit of our Quickshade dark tone, and we're going to apply this to all of the areas that we previously painted in Necromancer Cloak. And this is really going to help to give it the appearance that these areas are black. It's very difficult to wash down pure black. You need to highlight it back up, because once you apply this dark tone highlight to black, it doesn't help to define those areas of the model because they are already as dark as they can. Now here where the coils are and these areas here where you have these glowing orbs, we're just going to apply this almost like a glaze. We don't want this to wash into the recesses, into where the glowing orbs are. So very carefully just apply this as a glaze on the flattened surfaces, as you can see that I'm doing here. All right, and the last thing that you're going to want to do before you get this robot warrior ready for battle is you're going to want to base the model. Now for this, I want him to look like he's basically walking on a arid moonscape. So I am using a bit of ash gray. I've watered this down, and I'm going to apply this all over the rocks to the base. Thin down your paints and apply this in 2 coats, and that'll help you to get it inside those nooks and crannies nice and simply. Once the gray has dried on the base, we're going to apply some Quickshade Dark Tone all over the base. You may want to just thin this down with a little bit of water. And we're just going to apply this all over the base, ensuring that we work that wash into the recesses of all the nooks and crannies of this rocky moonscape base. And once the wash has had time to dry, we're just going to dry brush ash gray again across all of the rocks on the model. Finally, with Stone Golem, we're just going to apply a final highlight to this moonscape base. Very gently, just picking out the most raised rocks and edges. And there you have it in just a few simple steps. Our Necron warrior is ready for battle at a tabletop near you real soon. I do hope you enjoyed this tutorial as much as I enjoyed painting up this model for you today. Remember that you can find all of the paints and products used in this tutorial at your friendly local game store from your favorite online retailer such as Amazon or at www.thearmypainter.com. Stay tuned. We'll have part 2 in this series where we're going to apply some highlights and some extra details and effects in our masterclass tutorial. Remember that the magic in miniature painting is that it can be as simple or as challenging as you'd like it to be, but with the right techniques, you're sure to achieve some great results. We'll see you next time.